My mom cut me off because I didn't want to pay for my golden sister's wedding, which I wasn't even invited to. So, I took the house back and left my mom homeless. My mom is becoming a constant pain, and I can't take it one more second. Her demands are growing day by day, and I'm already at my limit. Before taking drastic measures, I want to do a reality check. I don't want to do something I'll regret later. My mother is pressuring me. I'm 42, to finance my sister Ellie's second wedding. She's 37. Her reasoning? Because my dad left his entire inheritance to me. But he had his reasons for that. Why would he leave anything to someone who couldn't be bothered to care whether he was alive or dead? My mother has always been a self-centered woman who barely cared about me or my dad. The only person who mattered to her was Ellie. My mother treated her as if she were the center of the universe, satisfying each of her desires and needs. This went far beyond typical favoritism. It was a total obsession. It all started because Ellie was born underweight and fragile. But she had the most beautiful face and charm that could melt any heart. My mom took care of her excessively, and that never changed, even after she recovered, grew up, and got married. My mom would step in to solve any minor inconvenience Ellie had, never letting her deal with the consequences or take responsibility for anything. Mom even did her schoolwork when Ellie didn't feel like doing it. That's why Ellie couldn't finish school, because Mom always protected her. Mom made her so dependent that it wasn't until high school that Ellie started eating on her own. Until then, Mom fed her by hand. Ellie never moved out of the house until she got married at 26. Even after that, Mom wouldn't leave her alone. She would call her 4 or 5 times a day, asking what she had eaten, what she had worn on a date, and so on. The more attention Ellie got, the more invisible I became. It's not that my mother neglected me completely. She still provided for me when I was a child, but I was always the third priority after my sister and herself. My mother prioritized herself over my dad and me. Salon sessions were more important than my dentist appointments. Often, she would forget to pick me up from school because her spa session ran late. The only positive part was my dad. We had a special bond, and he saw what was going on. We had quiet moments together where he would give me extra homework, or we would sneak out to eat ice cream to make me feel seen and valued. But Dad was a very hard-working man, so he wasn't home much. When he was, my mom would do her best to direct his attention to Ellie. Looking back, I realized my mom was raising Ellie to be completely dependent on her, making sure she always needed her in her life, like kangaroos that carry their babies in their pouches, which I believe are called marsupials. The only difference is that my mother intended to carry an adult baby for a quarter of a century. If I could, I would have left home in high school because I was tired of living in her shadow. I finished college, got a job, and built a life away from home. My dad always made sure to stay in touch by calling or texting me constantly, even traveling to visit me when he had time. My mom would write to me occasionally during holidays or birthdays and would see my posts on Facebook. Everything was going well until everything changed 11 years ago. Dad got very sick. At first, it seemed like a common cold that wouldn't go away. He lived and worked with that condition for months and didn't take it seriously. Mom didn't instigate him to get a checkup. When the cough became unbearable, he had tests done, and they told him he had a severe lung infection. I was working in another city when we found out, and I rushed home immediately. It broke my heart to see him lying alone in his room while Mom and Ellie were out for a manicure session. Dad broke down when he saw me. He was in the hospital for a week, and Mom barely visited him for more than a few minutes a day. Let me tell you, she didn't work, and she could have kept him company, but she had a schedule full of beauty and fitness classes. They discharged him 2 days later and assigned a hospital nurse. Mom didn't have to do anything except dedicate her time, and that was too much for her. The day I returned to be with my father, she acted so surprised to see me that she wanted to hug me, but I rejected her. I complained in a low voice about leaving Dad alone at home. She said they went to buy groceries. She lied to my face. It was obvious from her appearance that they come from a spa session. Ellie was already divorced and lived with her mom. Her first marriage barely lasted a year. It's not that Mom didn't care absolutely for Dad. She did. She wasn't evil, but she was too self-centered. Everyone came second to him and herself. She lived in her world. She sat next to Dad but was busy posting stories, doing skincare treatments, or chatting with Ellie. She left everything in the nurse's hands and wasn't willing to compromise her daily routine. When I went to visit my father for a week, seeing his condition and my mother's neglect, I could not leave him alone. Although I returned to work after a week, I could not accept the idea that he needed me. Shortly after, I learned that his condition was critical. I immediately resigned from my job, claiming a family medical emergency, and returned home. I became his primary caregiver and asked my mother and Ellie to help me plan so we could all support him in his treatment. My mom tried to help, but she was not the most reliable person to do so. She forgot to give him his medicines on time. If she went out to look for an oxygen cylinder, she would stop at the beauty salon and return after 4 or 5 hours. Until then, I had to look for another one. For her, everything was a temporary annoyance, as if he would get better at any moment. She was barely with him, saying it was too emotionally draining for her. She even went on vacation with her friends during one of my father's worst episodes. I was the one who was by my father's side, taking care of him and making sure he had company. My mother started to worry more about him when his condition worsened, but it was too late. As she had to return to the hospital, seeing him deteriorate in that hospital room fueled the silent anger that had been building up for years. I felt that if they had taken him to get checked out in time, maybe they could have saved him. When Dad passed away, I was devastated. I left home the day of his funeral and never returned. After his death, his lawyer contacted me to send me his will. In it, my dad left me everything: the house, the savings, all of their assets. My mother and Ellie received nothing. I was left speechless. I knew he loved me, but I didn't expect him to completely shut them out. He probably saw how they treated him in his last days, and this was his way of showing me that he had noticed everything. Naturally, the will unleashed a scandal. My mother and Ellie were furious. My dad's lawyer told me that Ellie screamed at him when he revealed the will, saying there was no way her dad would do that to her. The lawyer stopped her cold, explaining that my dad had left explicit instructions for everything to go to me. She did not contest the will, but she held a grudge. My mom called me to say, "I hope you share the inheritance with us." I blocked her after that conversation. I didn't talk to her for years. I was too exhausted to deal with it. She tried every means to contact me, but I never responded and cut off all communication. I moved back to the city where I worked. I found a job, fell in love with a colleague, got married, and moved abroad without my mom knowing anything. 3 years ago, when I had a baby, my mother appeared at my house, apologizing and saying that she wanted to be part of my daughter's life. She said, "I've lived with guilt ever since he died. I never thought your dad would pass away. If I had known, I would have spent more time with him." She had stopped grooming herself, saying she wasn't interested anymore, although it also had to do with the fact that salon sessions were expensive and she had lost her ATM card, as she used to call it. My mom shed tears and said she genuinely wanted to be a part of my daughter's life, and I just gave her a chance. At first, everything was going well. She would video call to see my baby and text me to ask how I was. But it didn't last long. She started hinting that she was having financial difficulties, hoping I would send her money, but I didn't. A month ago, I got a call from my mom. She sounded happy, almost euphoric, which was weird. I prepared myself, knowing that could only mean one thing. She wanted something. And I was right. She told me that Ellie was getting married again and explained how much this wedding would mean to her after her traumatic first marriage. Then she dropped the bomb. She expected me to pay for the wedding. First, she and I weren't in contact. Second, after Dad's will, she made it clear that she considered me some kind of villain, the greedy sister who stole her inheritance. She had never once contacted me to check in or have any kind of relationship. My mom was shocked when I rejected the idea. "How could you not agree? You didn't share the inheritance with her. She accepted her fate, but paying for her wedding is something you should have gladly offered. Regardless of the inheritance thing, as an older sister, you have no remorse for your little sister." I was flabbergasted by her response. What the hell? Mom never tried to build a bond with us, and now she wants me to take on the role of the older sister? What nonsense. I told her very clearly that I was not going to pay for the wedding. She got furious, saying it was my responsibility because Dad had left me everything. She continued with a speech about family obligations, how I was monopolizing the family fortune, and how Ellie deserved this happiness. I told her that I didn't owe anything to anyone. She started manipulating me and said, "What options do we have now? Tell me." I already paid the initial amount to reserve the place, dealt with the decorators and musicians, and everything. The invitations already went out with the location of the place. We can't just cancel. Here, I realized something even ruder. She expected me to pay for a party I wasn't even invited to. When I pointed this out, She realized it was wrong and said I should have been invited. She was silent for a moment and then added, "We thought you would be busy with the kid. It's a long trip with such a small baby, jet lag, and all that stuff. And maybe you weren't interested, so we let it go. But we'd be delighted if you could come. You don't need an invitation to attend your sister's wedding, right? Come on, it would be fun if we all got together." I cut her off immediately. Again, I don't need empty words. I know their true faces. She begged me to save her reputation since the invitations had already been sent. I hung up the call, saying that I wouldn't give them a single cent of my dad's inheritance. I thought she would back out, but she didn't. She continued harassing me with manipulative messages and voice notes. She even went so far as to say that if I didn't comply, maybe it would be better for her to cut off contact with me and pretend that she only had one daughter. Look, I don't mind not having her in my life. I don't. But her insistence has me fed up. I want her to pay for her actions. I let her live in the house despite what she did to my dad. I think it's time for her to reap the rewards of her actions. I want to send her an eviction notice, but I'm hesitating. My husband says I should be ready to face the trial of public opinion if I decide to kick my mother out of the house she has lived in for 45 years. It's frowned upon in our society. Not everyone will bother to know the details, but they will be quick to judge and say I am cruel. So, do you guys think it's too harsh to leave her homeless? Update 1. Many of you asked why I let them live in the house for 10 years. Honestly, I wasn't ready to deal with the drama. When my dad died, I was emotionally broken. I had a lot of things to sort out. I was a 32-year-old single woman, jobless, aimless, and had just witnessed the loss of the most important person in my life. So, I left everything as it was and rushed to take back control of my life. During that process, I had the opportunity to settle abroad, and I never looked back. Now, I feel it is the right time to finish pending matters. The eviction left me no choice. She made my life miserable with her emails after I blocked her everywhere. She even went as far as saying that if I didn't pay for Ellie's wedding, she would cut me out of the family, and I would be dead to her. Ellie joined the attack and called me everything. According to them, I had tactically positioned myself next to my father to emotionally manipulate him. The accusation was absurd. I took care of my father because I loved him, not because I wanted the entire inheritance. I couldn't stand it anymore. I spent years swallowing my anger, watching how they were taking advantage of my dad and ignoring me. So, I decided it was time to take back what was mine. I sent them an eviction notice for the house. My mom went crazy after that. I guess she wasn't expecting me to do something like that, but I did. Her initial reaction was disbelief. Then she said, "No one can evict me from my husband's house. I've lived here for 45 years. How dare you even think that I would leave this house so easily?" I replied, "Where were you when your husband needed you the most? Busy doing your nails. You should ask the nail salon to let you live there." Then I told her that she could do whatever she wanted, but I was not going to back down on my decision. When she saw that I was determined, she softened and spoke to me about her vulnerability. She said, "Where am I going to go at this age? How am I going to support myself? I have been surviving on my pension and renting half of the house. If you evict me, where am I going to go?" I replied, "That is not my problem. Ask your golden daughter to take care of you." I told her she had 30 days to vacate, and whatever she did after that was none of my business. My mom realized she had made a mistake by asking me to finance Ellie's wedding. So, she quickly withdrew her demands and said, "If you don't want to pay for the wedding, that's fine. We can handle it alone. But please, don't evict me. Remove the notice." I told her, "I'm not going to pay for the wedding, nor am I going to remove the notice. I'm going to get back everything that's mine. I let you live there for 10 years. And instead of appreciating it, you insult me and manipulate me for money. It never mattered to you. Why should I care for you now? All your life, you were busy. Go to your golden daughter. Why are you begging me now? Maybe your only daughter is not capable of taking care of you." My words hurt Ellie's ego, and she told Mom to vacate the house as soon as possible and move in with her. She's been bragging to everyone that she'll take care of her mother and that she doesn't need my favor. Mom vacated the house on the 26th. I hired an agency to renovate it and put it up for rent. It's only been a week since then. Ellie moved her wedding from a garden to a town hall that has a lake, which has caused a stir in the family and the relatives group. I have not heard from her or anyone else since then, and honestly, I don't care. Update 2. I have news. My mom has been living with Ellie since the eviction, but the family drama didn't stop there. I recently learned that Ellie's husband wasn't exactly thrilled about having his mother-in-law as a permanent guest. He was fed up with my mom, being as difficult as she is. Ellie's husband was already upset because Ellie wasted so much money booking the venue and other wedding-related expenses. He never wanted a big wedding, but Ellie convinced him by telling him she would get me to pay most of it. However, when she didn't get the money, they had to cancel everything. Changing the venue and forwarding the invitations was embarrassing for him and his family. Then, on top of that, Ellie brought her nosy mother to live with them. Who would want that? I found out through a gossipy relative that Ellie's husband gave her an ultimatum to get mom out of the house, or he would consider separating. After hearing this, I was pretty sure my mom would try to contact me. A few weeks went by, and as expected, my mom came looking for me again, claiming she had nowhere to go. She cried, saying she would have to stay in a shelter if I didn't do the right thing and let her go back to the house. She tried to play the pity card, saying that she was just an old lady with no one else. I told her that I was sorry for her situation, but that the house was no longer available. I had rented it to a friend's brother, and he had already moved in. She screamed on the phone, accusing me of abandoning her and saying, "Blood is thicker than water." I finally said what I had wanted to say for years. Maybe if you and Ellie had treated Dad with a minimum of respect, you wouldn't be in this mess. Who knows, maybe Dad would still be alive if you had cared about him. You ignored him so much that the man began to ignore himself and let his health deteriorate. To escape the toxicity of his wife, he immersed himself in work and never took care of himself. I hung up the call and cried for hours. I don't know why, but that day I missed my dad terribly. Some relatives contacted me, saying they couldn't believe I left my mother homeless. They urged me to forgive her and give her back her house. I stood my ground and cut off contact with everyone who tried to make me feel guilty. I know that my relatives did not see firsthand how my mother treated my father. That's why they see me as the irrational one now. But after everything they did to me, I was no longer willing to be her safety net. My mom ended up temporarily moving in with a distant relative, but her welcome there is wearing thin. I heard she is planning to try and manipulate another relative into taking her in. But at this point, she has burned so many bridges that she doesn't have many options left. Some people may think I went too far, but I don't care. The home, my inheritance, and my peace of mind. I earned it all with years of loyalty and love toward my father, who saw me and valued me. I will treasure that memory and finally move forward without guilt, knowing that I did the best for myself. If he did not trust them with his money, why would I let them use a penny of mine? They don't deserve it. And if my father didn't want them to have his money, I can't betray him and give it to them. Update 3. I would like to say that what happened with my sister is not my fault, but then I would be lying. Although, at least it has not been completely my fault. I will tell you what happened, and you will tell me what you think. After some relatives told me that I was being cruel for leaving my mother homeless, I made a post to give my version of the events. This turned out better than I expected because I hardly received any more messages worrying about my mother, except for one person who said that I should help her anyway. You can't be nice to everyone, I suppose. Some people will always be just as narcissistic as my sister and my mother. But here is where the problems begin, problems for my sister. Instead of the family coming after me with torches to accuse me, as if I were Frankenstein and his monster, they decided to go against my mother and my sister. Perhaps my brother-in-law didn't know the full story, but he has decided to leave my sister. I don't think anyone can blame that man. If he got to know my mother better when she moved in with them, he probably expected a similar future with my sister. A bleak future. He must be afraid that my sister would abandon him the same way my mother abandoned my father during his illness. So, there is no wedding. And, as the house belonged to her fiancé, she had to leave. Now, I have left two people homeless, one directly and another indirectly. Currently, my sister is living with my mother in the same relative's house. This is no surprise to anyone, but it is the same person who has asked me to forgive my mother and let her move back in. It's quite hypocritical of her to say that, given that she simply wants my mother and sister to leave her place. Even though there are people who think I might be the bad one for leaving them on the street, I'm not going to soften my heart. Being left on the street and without a penny is the least these two opportunists deserve. Update 4. I have more good news. For those who are not very in favor of my mother and my sister, now they are literally on the street. After the relative who encouraged me to forgive them and take them back, the story is a little longer, but I wanted to give you a summary of how the update is going. My mother was not happy with her new home, especially because she had to share a room and bed with my sister. This relative did not make things easy for them either. She encouraged them to get a job and get ahead, although, according to what I have been told, she was kind at first with that advice. However, my mother had other plans, and they consisted of going to the house where my friend's brother now lives to ask him to help them and let them stay there. The worst part is that she wanted to do it for free at first because, according to my mother, that was still his house. But his brother didn't know them and said he wasn't going to allow that. Plus, he was paying rent, so it was his right to decide who lived there. Well, my mother offered to pay him something like $100 a month, which doesn't even cover a small part of the rent. So he refused the offer and asked her to leave. But my mother broke some small garden ornaments that I had bought to improve the house, and he called the police. Although my mother had already left by the time they arrived, she told me where she was staying. The police went to ask her some questions after discovering her whereabouts. This was the last straw for the relative who was hosting them, and she told them that they had to leave her house. My mother asked for a few more weeks, but this relative was firm and told them to leave immediately. The funniest thing is that I know these details because this relative has been crying to someone who told me I should send her a message telling her to forgive my mother and my sister and not leave them without a roof. I don't think she'd like to receive a message like that after what she had to live through with them. So in the last few days, my mother and sister have been sleeping in a homeless shelter. It's not that I'm making fun of people who are homeless. In fact, I've helped homeless people in my new country, but if anyone deserves a life lesson, it's them. At least now they'll discover that life is not just going to beauty salons and that there is something called work. My mother likes to act like she's older than she really is. She's in her mid-60s. My sister, on the other hand, is a healthy, capable woman who can work. If they can both get their act together and actually put in the effort, they could move forward. Update 5. I don't feel bad since none of our relatives have tried to help my sister and my mother until they have seen how bad they can be and how much they deserve what they are going through, especially because they have not been able to get ahead. The trips to beauty salons and spas are long gone because, as I have been told, they look very run down and still live without a proper home. Although technically, they receive help from the government and are in apartments that the government offers to people in their situation in order to help them get ahead, even then, they have not managed to get a job, although I highly doubt that they have tried. I am only updating you to tell you why you have been asking me if they have tried to return to my house or return to a relative, but the answer to everything is no. Although this is true, I know little about what they've been up to lately.